Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is still morning. Welcome to the Stutterfords and Network Migration Services seminar on Australia and New Zealand today. To introduce myself, my name is Andrew Kerr, and you could possibly guess by the fact that I'm dressed in black and I'm also got a slight accent, I'm not a South African. I am actually a Kiwi. I did decide to wear the all black today. Not that they're playing today. My son was playing this morning at Cares, but anyway. Today, I'm going to do most of the talking, clearly, because you're here to find out whether you can immigrate to Australia or New Zealand. I am a licensed advisor for Australia and New Zealand. I'm one of only two in the country that's licensed for both countries. And today is going to be a talk also by Petport. Is anybody interested in actually taking their pets with them at some stage? Okay. And also our host, Stutterfords, will be doing a little bit of a talk on taking furniture, etc., etc. We will also usually have a couple of other people talking. Unfortunately, they are at weddings and on holiday. Financial people who move monies for you, financial movers, etc. Just a little bit of history on myself. Network Migration has been around about 25 years now. I've owned it for about 25 years. I came to South Africa in 1990. I joined Network in 1993 and I bought the company in 1996. We're blessed to have 4 offices. We have an office just by Fourways in Dainfern. We also have an office in Durban. We have an office in Zimbabwe. And we also have an office in New Zealand, an office in Auckland as well. Because those of you who are considering going to New Zealand are well aware that New Zealand is all about the job offer. And clearly our office in New Zealand has been going for about a year and a half now. It assists our clients with pointing them in the right directions on how to go about finding work. And I'll talk about that when I do my talk in about 10-15 minutes from now. Today, we can put mats up the front and have people sitting up the front if you want. You can sit on the tables at the back. Forgive us for potentially overbooking today. It's actually never happened that we've overbooked a seminar. But, welcome, and I'm sure today that when you walk out that door, you will know the rules, the regulations, the costs, the timeframes, everything about immigrating to Australia and New Zealand. If you want for me to assess you, the assessment is free. All I need from you is your CVs. And of course, it's not rules and regulations that you put your ages on your CVs because you don't actually have to. But I need to know your ages, please. So if you don't have your age on your CVs, could you please just put a line at the top or the bottom under your CVs, I'm 40 years old and my wife's 36, or whatever it may be. I need to know your ages. But if you email me your CVs, my business cards are at the back there. They're also in the folders that some of you have. I have some at the front. Please feel free. Today's very relaxed. Feel free to ask some questions. We can take these chairs here if you need to. A couple of those. Take them. Feel free to ask questions of any of us through the presentation. The whole thing's going to last about maybe an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 30 minutes, depending on how many questions you've got. But if you email me your CVs stipulating the country you want to be assessed for, I will email you back everything. Procedures, costs, timeframes, processes, everything. And that is free. If you do want to come and see me for a face-to-face consultation, I charge a once-off consultation fee of 600 Rand per consult. So that's if you're a couple of 600 Rand total, and I consult Mondays to Saturdays from my offices here in Dainfern. I can't do next Saturday, unfortunately. I'm doing a seminar down in Durban next Saturday, so just think about that if you're wanting to make an appointment. I'm going down to the Durban office, and one of my colleagues is actually getting married. So we're doing the seminar and then going to the wedding. So welcome today. I'm sure you'll find it, I hope you find it very informative. I'm going to welcome Justine to the podium. If we don't really have a podium, but I'm going to welcome Justine anyway. Justine is head of Petport, and she's going to discuss with you the situations with taking your animals into Australia and New Zealand. Thanks, Justine.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Okay, so I know there's only about 30% of you that want to take your pets with. So for the 70%, I'm going to keep it brief so you're not bored out of your minds. I know you have to see Andrew more than anybody else. My name is Justine. I'm the branch manager for Johannesburg Petport. We also have branches down in Cape Town, Joburg. We have a satellite branch in Port Elizabeth. And we also have independent agents that work for us in other areas. So anywhere you need your pets to be transported from, we can do so. Right, to get started for Australia and New Zealand, how many of you guys have already started the research? Okay, it can be a little bit daunting, correct, yes, yeah. There's a lot of information on the internet, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, but we're here to break it down for you. Okay, to get you started, your pet must be microchipped, all right? You can have a 7-year-old pet with a perfect vaccination history. If they haven't been microchipped, those vaccinations do not count, all right? So your first step is always to get your pet microchipped and then to get them revaccinated. The vaccinations are rabies, and then it's 5 and 1 for dogs, 3 and 1 for cats. Okay, once that step is out the way, you have to wait 30 days, and then you have what is called the rabies titer blood test. Okay, now this test is not to check to see if your pet has rabies. That can only be done by autopsying the brain, all right, and we don't want to do that. This is to check that your pet has sufficient protection against the rabies virus in their blood system. The minimum requirement is 0.5 mils. All right, we very, very seldom have failures. Okay, I know that's a big thing. What if my pet fails? We have approximately 1 failure a year. We had our first one this week, incidentally, for a lady who wants to transport her pets to New Zealand. All right, for the blood test, right, Australia, it's a flat 6 months. From the date the blood is drawn, 6 months, and then your pet may leave. So overall, if your pets haven't been microchipped, it's a 7-month process. For New Zealand, it's slightly different. If your pet has been microchipped and they've been vaccinated, there's no issues, you have your blood test done, it's 3 months. However, if you're having your microchip and your first vaccination is considered a primary vaccination, then they have the blood test, your pet may leave 6 months from the date of the primary vaccination. So again, so you're looking at about a 6-7 month process if you're starting from the beginning. Okay. Right, we get to just before travel. These are probably words that you've seen on the website, your health certificate. This is a set of documents that needs to be signed by your vet and then endorsed by the Department of Agriculture state vet. No, your pets aren't going anywhere if these documents aren't signed and endorsed. For New Zealand, the state vet actually keeps the documents for 24 hours, and they will come to our premises, which is where all pets will leave from, and they come and they seal the crates. They've got a little government seal that gets sealed, and that seal has to be in place when the pets arrive in New Zealand. So it is a little bit of a long journey for them because they're not allowed to be taken out when they transit through Sydney. But the quarantine facilities are very, very well versed in how to handle the pets when they get there. They get removed from the crates, they get a nice wipe down, a brush, a light meal, they get a little bit of a walk in the outside, and then they get put to bed in the following days when all the examination starts. On day of travel, we give the pets a nice light breakfast because they can't have a full tummy when they board the plane. This is just a recipe for motion sickness and unpleasantness in the crate. The pets are exercised, they're brushed, they have their appointment with the state vet, and then we take them through to the airport. We have climate-controlled vehicles, lovely air-conditioned vehicles that the pets travel in. They travel in better style than we do. All right, for the boarding. All right, now you've probably received a couple of quotes from various companies. A lot of the companies require the pets to stay for the final 30 days. We ask nicely, politely for the final 7 days. It is not compulsory. You can negotiate a shorter time with your consultant, especially if you live close to us and you're willing to transport the pets up and down. But the final 7 days, this happens at BKC Pet Boarding, which is our sister company, and they share the premises with us. They are phenomenal. My own pets stay there when I travel. Okay, this is where we do the veterinary health clearance and the government endorsements as well. That's just a couple of pictures of the facility. This is the indoor play area for the bigger dogs. That's the cattery with their little water feature and the fig tree they can climb. Everything is enclosed because cats are notorious for being escape artists. So we have a very, very secure facility, and everything is double doored. So you can't open one door without the previous door being closed. We're that careful about their safety. This is Reason. He manages our kennels here at BKC. He is phenomenal. We actually poached him from a game farm down in Durban. Some more pictures. That's our cattery. As you can see, we've got little downstairs and upstairs units. So if your cat is a ground dweller, we'll put them in the downstairs unit. This is also for the geriatric cat. And then if your cat is a climber, then we'll put them in the upstairs units. All right, we build all our own crates for travel. Inside the crates, we put 2 water bowls for each pet, and the water bowls go up in size depending on the size of the pet. And there's travel mats that get put into the crates as well. These are absorbent and they're hardy, so if your pet does mess in the crate, then it's absorbent, so they're not sitting in a puddle of their own waste when they get to the other side. You are allowed to put a blanket for each of your pets in the crate. No toys, no collars, no harnesses, no food are allowed to travel with them. They're all potential hazards and choking hazards as well. These are a bit dark. I don't know if everybody can see them. The crates for Australia and New Zealand have to be double meshed. That's a requirement. And at the top there, you'll see there's a cutout. There's another double mesh section there. That's for ventilation. We are the only company that offers that type of crate. It's just because when the pets sit in the crates, they pant a lot, they generate a lot of hot air, and the circulation can get quite compromised. So that extra ventilation point just helps to keep the crate a little bit cooler for them. A couple more examples of our crates. We also do put shredded paper in there for the pets that like to dig and cover up and play around with funny things. You can see the 2 water bowls. They are securely fastened into the crate with cable ties so that they're not sloshing around. Okay, that's just a diagram of the plane. The pets are kept in the cargo hold. Now, the cargo hold is pressurized and temperature controlled. The same conditions you experience upstairs in the cabin is what they experience downstairs in the cargo hold. And if you have any notions of your pet being on one of those baggage thingies, they never are. All right, they're securely fastened to a pallet and they're transported to the aircraft with forklifts. They are also the last on the plane and the first off the plane. All right, when they arrive into either Melbourne or New Zealand. Now, for Australia, there is only one quarantine facility, and that is Melbourne. The other ones are all closed down, and they were all consolidated to Melbourne. So we only fly pets into Melbourne, which means there's a limited amount of routes we can use. We generally use Emirates, Qatar, and Singapore to fly the pets because those are the quickest routes to get. There are some airlines that do ban breeds. For those breeds, we will use a much longer routing through Qantas, and that goes via New Zealand. It's not a great route, but it is there for those who have the breeds that we battle to get onto the other airlines. There are 5 breeds of each to each country that are banned. If you think you have one of those breeds, come chat to me afterwards. Okay. All right. On arrival in either of the countries, the quarantine staff actually collect the pets. All right, so you don't have to worry about any of that. They will come, they will clear the pets, they will collect them and transport them through to quarantine. This is to maintain isolation. Once the pets have done their 10 days quarantine, that's for both Australia and New Zealand, you can either go and collect them yourselves, or if you are not living close by, then we can have one of our partner agents chat to you about onward transport. That's another one of our vehicles. Okay, any questions? Okay, what the gentleman asked is if you've got 2 different dogs, how do they travel? We keep families together. All right, so they're not allowed to share a crate, but they will travel together. So they essentially fly on the same ticket, so they will actually be fastened to the same pallet together. So they will always be with each other, next to each other, essentially. They won't be able to see each other face to face because of the way the crates need to be stacked, but they'll be right next to each other, so they can hear each other and smell each other. That's going to depend on what services you require. We do everything from the South African side, and then if you require additional services like permits, quarantine, onward travel in either Australia or New Zealand, we refer you to our partner agents. We've made some great deals, and we've got some great pricing with them for our clients, only because they are the experts. You know, we can try and do it for you, and we have done it before, but we find it's just better to have the professionals on that side doing it for you. They have the contacts, it's streamlined, it's much quicker. If the dogs are aggressive. Look, for aggressive dogs, what we're going to do is recommend some additional training time prior, because aggressive dogs are not allowed into Australia and New Zealand. You're going to face complications on arrival on that side. So we recommend extra training to get them calmed down. But our trainers are excellent. They're very, very, very well trained in handling aggressive dogs especially. We had a Boer bull that was with us for 7 months. He had to come to us for the full 7 months. And when he came, you couldn't walk into his kennel. He would literally try and take your head off. By the end, he was as meek as a lamb. Our guys are really, really great. They will actually dedicate time every single day to training them, to actually teaching them to walk and all those things. We even do the crate training in the final 7 days that your pets are with us. We will spend the time doing the crate training. Okay, everybody, if there's any further questions, I will be at the back afterwards. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Justine. Just before we introduce our hostess from Stutterfords, one of our main service providers that isn't here today, unfortunately, he had a previous engagement as a gentleman called Evan. He comes from a company called FX Pro. For those of you who want to shift your funds, I get asked a lot of questions as well, what about tax clearances and things like that? Depending on how much money you're taking, of course, you don't need a tax clearance to take money out of South Africa, but you can, of course, take 10, 11 million out now, and if you're taking that amount, of course, clearly you would need a tax clearance. If you're shifting funds, be it 1,000 Rand or 10 million Rand, and you do it through your banks, with no disrespect to the banks, they will charge you a lot more than specific financial companies like FX Pro will charge you to actually shift the funds. So what FX Pro does is they open up a mercantile bank account for you here in South Africa, and when you're on your instruction, you put the money into the mercantile bank account, and again on your instruction, that money is then sent to Australia and New Zealand. They charge one fee for that. It's just under 400 Rand. It's about 393 Rand. That's what they charge, whether you're shifting 1,000 Rand or you're shifting 10 million. That's it. And you'll save incredible amounts of money by doing it that way, because the banks do it slightly differently and will charge you a lot more. So again, Rose, who's just walked up the front here, is in charge of our relocation division. She is, if you want information on things like flights and furniture, clearly, and moving pets, etc., your first contact can either be Stutterfords or Petport, FX Pro, or just deal through Rose here. Drop her an email. All our emails are our first names at networkmigration.com. So it's pretty standard to do, so please feel free to have a chat with any of us afterwards if you want to as well. Now our hostess, Karen, is going to be talking to you about what Stutterfords do. Thank you.
Hi everybody, can you hear me? Thank you very much for attending today. Wow, and we really didn't expect such a huge turnout, but it's awesome. Stutterford Van Lines is a removal company. We will assist you with moving your furniture once you've got your visa and your job and everything in either Australia or New Zealand. We've got trained consultants that come out to your residence. They will spend at least about an hour with you at your residence, going through each room, unfortunately checking all the cupboards, the drawers, the everything, just to make sure that we know exactly what volume you are wanting to ship to either Australia or New Zealand. Once they have done that, we will then put together a door-to-door quotation for you, meaning our crew will come to your residence, wherever you are, and they will pack up everything for you. They wrap, they pack, they make sure that everything is really nice and secure. If you have a look to the right of me, there are some of our boxes that you can come and have a look at, the wrapping material, just so you know what is expected on the day when the crew arrive. We will then do all your clearances for you. We will send your shipment across to either Australia or New Zealand. On that side, our agents will then unpack for you and everything. Marinda over here, she's our export shipping manager. She's got consultants that will assist you with your shipment once it's been packed up. They will keep you updated as to where your container is, what day it's going to arrive, etc., etc. Then they will be your point of contact. Then most shipments either go in a 20-foot container, which is equivalent to a single garage size. A 40-foot container is equivalent to a double garage size. Now you may think, my stuff's never going to fit. But I'm telling you, the way our crew pack, they are trained, they're professionals, they get it in. Then allowing for packing, for a 20-foot container, it's 2 to 3 days. For a 40-foot container, 3 to 4 days. Please, and may I ask, when our crew are at your residence packing up, please be there. Make time for this. Because we've had so many clients that rush off and they leave the crew alone. I'm not saying our crew are not responsible and they're not secure. They definitely are. They can be left alone. But it's just for your peace of mind, so you know that everything has been packed and you have seen how the crew are packing. So you are happy. Then the estimated sailing times for a 20-foot container to Australia is 30 days, to New Zealand is 38 days. Then you need to allow between 15 and 20 days for customs clearance on either side. The air freight to Australia and New Zealand is 7 to 10 days. Your customs clearance there is additional 3 days on that. We do have smaller groupage shipments. That is where a container is being shared by 3 or 4 or maybe 5 or 6 people. It does be kept separate. We make an inventory list. All the boxes, all the furniture is marked. It's got your name, it's got a serial number, everything, so we know exactly what is your items, what is the next person's items. It does not get mixed at all. The only thing with the groupage shipment, you need to allow between 4 to 6 months, because we are only allowed to ship that container once it is completely full. So it might be, if you're not going to be taking your whole household and you've got a few personal effects that you want to take with, this is the option that you would use, or air freight. Air freight is slightly expensive, but it is faster than the groupage. Then once your container has arrived in Australia or New Zealand, so once your container has arrived in Australia or New Zealand, the container will go into quarantine. Unfortunately, your household effects do not get delivered to your residence in the container. It does get offloaded onto the agent's truck and they will deliver it to your residence because of the quarantine. We can ship vehicles, motorbikes. Unfortunately, they do need to be paid up in full. You need to have them microdot chipped. You need an import and export, an import permit for either Australia or New Zealand, and a copy of the registration certificate. Your vehicle, as you can, I don't know if you can all see, there's 2 ways of doing a vehicle. If you're shipping only a vehicle, then the vehicle will go in the container alone. If not, the vehicle is at the bottom. We build a crate and your household effects get packed on top. If it's not a lot of household effects, it goes at the back part of the container and the vehicle's in the front, depending on how much items you have to ship. If you've got a lot of household effects and a vehicle, then you may need a 40-foot container or 2 20-foots, depending on the options that you choose. Then the most important thing about your move, and everyone always moans and groans about this, but you need to have insurance. Insurance is so important. You are more than welcome to use your own insurance, but we do offer an insurance policy that is designed specifically for shipments. The reason being, should the ship run into trouble and the containers fall off or the boat sinks or whatever, the shipping line shares those costs with everybody that's on that ship. They don't pay for anything. All those costs are for you. So that's why marine insurance is really important. It is very time consuming. The inventory list that we will send to you, it is itemized. You need to go through it line by line, read the fine print. For example, you may have 20 pairs of suits. The one suit costs 10,000 Rand and the one suit is 500 Rand. That's what the insurance company needs to know. So when they're doing their assessment at the end for claims, they know how to pay out and how to allocate the monies. So insurance is very important. At the end of the seminar, Marinda and I will be around for you to ask any questions. What I will do also on Monday, I will email you all, if you've left your email address at the back, giving you my details. So you can ask me if there's any questions. I will attend to it for you and assist you as far as we can. It's all free of charge. We do not charge even for our consultants to come out to your residence. Rand value for a 20-foot container at the moment, because remember it all relates to rate of exchange. So at the moment it's about 85,000 Rand there. A 40-foot container is about 120,000 in that region. And a lot of people do ask us, is it worth taking your furniture? If you go onto the net and you surf around a little bit and you just do comparisons, because you can see a two-seater couch in Australia is maybe $1,000, in New Zealand $1,200. So if you just work out the comparison and just for yourself, then you can see if it's worth it for you, because you know your budget and you know what you can afford. Absolutely. If you love your stuff, absolutely. And it gives us work. Any more? The shipping lines do not allow firearms at all. At all. So if you, if you want to take your firearm, you'll need to arrange. What we will do is afterwards, if you want to leave your details with me, we've got a link for everybody that you can go onto, and it gives you all the rules and regulations as to how you can go about getting your firearms. But on the shipping line, within the containers, they do not allow at all. Air freight, no. Air freight is very expensive. Air freight is very expensive. Because remember, air freight, they don't charge you just for your household things, they'll charge you for the crate. So it's volumetric weight. So they measure like that, so it is very expensive. So air freight we really suggest only for personal effects. You know, your prized, your photo albums, you know, that type of thing that you don't want to take with you on the flight. They do allow most wooden furniture if it hasn't been bought on the side of the road. So if you've bought it from Mr. Price or one of the other shops, they do allow it. It does have to be cleaned, it does have to be treated. So, but if you've got wicker, that needs to be cleaned, eh? Yes. Sorry, Miranda knows the rules and regulations for that. Yes? Sorry? Handmade furniture, no. No, it needs to be treated. Has it been treated? Okay. Hold on a second. Handmade furniture?
Sorry, just making sure it's clean and then maybe put a coat of varnish over it. Okay.
Anything else? No, it covers everything. So if you take insurance with us, then we cover you from pack up. Yes, yes, yes. So what happens is when we unpack, you make a note, should there be damages. There isn't normally, but you never know, because you know the containers get bashed around, picked up, moved all over the show. So should there be, then you just make a note for us. You've got 7 days to let us know that there were damages. We will then get you the documentations for the claim, and then we've got 30 days to hand that over to the insurance company. Replacement value. So remember, when you're doing the insurance, to please just go online and just check, because a table and chair that you bought last year for 2,000 Rand, this year is 4,000 Rand. So just go and do a slight comparison, just so you know, and especially if you're going to Australia or New Zealand, just see what their replacement values are. So the insurance is very important, and it does unfortunately take a little bit of time to run through.
Thank you, Karen. By the way, remember that the services that Studifers offer, that Petport offer, etc., the quotations and the work they do prior to you coming on board with them are free. So, and one thing that Studifers have told me is they will look at quotes that you get from other companies as well, and in some instances they'll match those quotes, and clearly, unless of course they're ridiculously different. So use the service, as it's a free service. This is a huge thing you're planning on doing. It's expensive, it's emotional, so it's something that, get all your ducks in a row as you're preparing, or as we're preparing your visas. Okay, for today's exercise, I'm going to assume, thank you, I'm going to assume you are all leaving and you're all using my company to do it. So please don't think I'm being presumptuous, it's just the way I do the seminar, okay? So those of you thank you. Those of you, I'm going to do Australia first because Australia is essentially a little bit easier than New Zealand to get into, providing you qualify. Okay, it's a little bit harder to qualify to get into, in fact, a lot harder to qualify to get into Australia, but I'm going to do Australia first. Can you? It's not working. Is it on? Thank you. Okay, this is just a few pictures of the Australia's cities, of course. Being an immigration consultancy, by the way, if you're going to use an immigration consultant, please make sure they're licensed. We are governed by the MARA, Migration Agents Registration Association in Australia, and also the Immigration Advisors Authority in New Zealand, which means that you are protected. Unfortunately, in South Africa, there are a couple of companies that are purporting to be licensed. They're not. If you use a non-licensed advisor, your money is not protected. If you pay a licensed advisor, your money is held in a trust account, and the advisor can only take certain amounts of those funds from that trust account as and when certain certain goals are achieved in the process. So be it Network Migration or me or my team, or be it, I can recommend, there's 5 New Zealand licensed advisors in South Africa. We're all good mates. We know each other really well, and I can recommend them. But please make sure that you're using a licensed advisor if you're going to use an advisor, okay? We do every visa on the planet. If you're going on a holiday, we'll do a holiday visa for you. We do skilled migrant, we do parents, we do work visas, business visas, retirement visas, business owner visas, of course, investor visas, etc. So it doesn't really matter what type of visa you do, we can do it. I'm blessed with I think I've got 17 colleagues, staff members now. 8 of them are file managers. So if you come on board with Network Migration, depending on the size of your family and which country you're going to, we're going to charge you somewhere between $3,000 to $6,000. So that's roughly 30,000 to 60,000 Rand per individual and or potentially per family. So those are our service fees. If you come on board with us, you're allocated a file manager. That file manager works with you right through until you become a permanent resident of the country you're going to. Clearly, I work with the file managers on making sure, of course, all the paperwork is correct. They will put together the paperwork for me. I will check it, and we will prepare it, and I will then sign it off for submission. It has to be me signing it off because I'm the licensed agent, clearly. But I have an awesome team of people. I'm very blessed with a wonderful team of people that actually very much care about this process that you're going to do. By the way, thank you for putting up with the camera. I've done about 5,000 seminars in the last 20 years, and I've never had one filmed. So I'm actually feeling a little bit nervous, which is very unusual. But anyway, so we're moving on to, you might not be able to see, unfortunately, but when you're going on a application to Australia, skilled migrant is a points-tested visa. It's based on your age, your qualifications, your ability to communicate in English, your work experience. You might have a qualified spouse, etc., etc. So if we looked up there, you'll notice, if you can see it, ages 18 to 24, but if you are 45 years old or over, you can forget going to Australia on a skilled points-tested visa. You will not qualify. I'm sorry about that. Australia dropped their points last year, or dropped the age requirements last year on July 1st from 50 down to 45, and even on work visas now, on the 1st of March this year, they dropped the age from 40 down to 45 as well. It was also up at 50. The only way to get into Australia if you are over the age of 45 is a business visa. Are there any business owners that are looking to go to Australia? Okay. You would need to be under the age of 55 on most business visas, or you've got children in Australia, or you're looking at doing what they call a significant investment, which is significant investment, for example, is $5 million, which is 50 million odd Rand. So you can buy your way into these countries, if you do have significant funds to buy your way in. On a business visa for Australia, you need 2 things. One, you need to be worth personally and business net worth 800,000 Australian dollars, which is available for transfer to Australia within 2 years of the visa being granted. Work on around 10. The Rand is a little bit stronger than it used to be in the last few weeks, but if you worked on 10 for both countries, you'd be pretty safe. So you've got to be worth about 8 million Rand. And you must show that the business that you have owned in South Africa, or wherever you own your business, has a turnover of the equivalent of 500,000 Australian dollars for a period of 2 years out of the last 4 years, your fiscal year, your tax year. So That's really pretty much the only way to get into Australia on a business visa. That is then issued to you temporarily, and in 4 years, you've got to achieve certain goals. I have all of this in a cut and paste emails that I can send you. So if you're a businessman, I just need to know that you qualify. I would need to either speak to you on the telephone, we can always Skype, or of course we can meet face to face, or drop me an email, etc., etc. But business peoples for Australia are granted a 4-year temporary entry visa. In that 4 years, you've got to live in Australia for 1 year, and you've got an own and operate a business for 2 of those years. Depending on which state you're going to will depend on what the requirements are. Let's pick Queensland for an example. A lot of our business clients go into Queensland, which is Brisbane, Gold Coast, etc., up the coastline there. The minimum investment in the business that you are going into in Australia must be 200,000 Australian dollars. That's the minimum, okay? And then after the 4 years, as long as you've owned a business for 2 years and lived there for 1, and you've put in at least a couple of 100,000 and you've hired 1 or 2 Australians usually, you are then granted permanent residency, which means ironically you can then shut the business if you want to. But that's a business visa. An investor visa, you need to be worth, not the premium one, not the 5 million one, where you're giving the Aussies 5 million bucks for 4 years. You need to be worth 2.25 million Australian dollars, so about 22 million rand, and you are investing 1.5 million of that money in a state bond for a period of 4 years. Leave the money there. I call it the buy your way in visa. You're writing them a check, and the money will make probably 3.5% interest over that period of 4 years. Other than that, does anybody have their children living in Australia, please? Okay. This is another way, of course, to go in. A parent visa, it's based on the balance of family test. You would need an equal or greater amount of your children living in Australia at the time. And the one that is sponsoring you needs to be a resident for 2 years. So if you've got 3 children, 2 of them need to be living in Australia. If you've got 4, 2 of them in Australia. So if you've got 2, clearly 1 in Australia. And then if you do a normal parent application, you just lodge a normal parent visa, the processing time is 33 years until you'd actually be approved. So with all due respect to the parents, we're possibly not going to be around in another 33 years. So what Australia brought in 4 or 5 years ago, and those of you who are wishing to potentially take your parents at a later stage need to know this, they brought in what they call the contributory parent visa. And that's where you contribute an amount of money to the Australians, and it pretty much goes towards your health care. You're paying them $43,600 each, which is about $80,000. Dollars, and then that means you're covered medically for 10 years. And then your assurer, who needs to be an Australian resident, it doesn't have to be your family member, it usually would be, will put up a $10,000 assurance of support for the main applicant and $4,000 for the spouse. So if you're a husband and wife and you're going over to live with your son or daughter in Australia, you're looking at $1 million. That's what it's going to cost you to get processed in about 18 months. They're currently running parent visas in about 18 months. Other than that, if you're going in on a work visa, you need a sponsored offer of employment. And by sponsored, I mean the company has gone to the Department of Home Affairs. Australia Border Control, you've all seen the movie, the TV show. They used to call the Department of Immigration in Australia the Department of Immigration and Border Protection. Very recently, they changed that name to the Department of Home Affairs. Okay, so when I say Home Affairs, it's Australia. So if you're going into Aussie on a work visa, the company has to apply to DHA, the Department of Home Affairs, to nominate you. And of course you've got to meet certain requirements, and the process takes about 4 to 6 months, so the company better be prepared to wait 4 to 6 months for you. And then once they receive the nomination, then you can lodge your application. So it has to be a sponsored offer of skilled employment that makes sense to DHA, because they will only give the nomination out if, of course, they feel that you do fill the necessary requirements for the position. Clearly, we can talk about that privately again at any stage, but that's how you're getting into Australia on a work visa. Very, very different from New Zealand, so don't mix them up, okay? And then when it comes to your English proficiency for Australia, everybody, you might say, well, I've got an English passport. That means you're exempt from sitting an English test. But that doesn't necessarily mean you'll pass the pass mark. Because, as you can see here, on the point system again, you might not be able to see it, but competent English is You've all heard of possibly the English test, the IELTS test, International English Language Testing System. There's actually 4 of them you can do now. You can do the Pearson's test, you can do the British Council test, you can do the Cambridge test, or you can do the TOEFL test. And a lot of that depends on your qualification. So just be aware that some of the assessing authorities will require your English language as part of the assessment. But a 6 in each band, 60%, is a 0. It's a pass as far as immigration's concerned, but it's 0 points. 70% odd, is 7 in each band, is 10 points, as you can see here. And superior English, they call it, is 8 in each band, or 80%. We have a lot of clients that sit this English test more than once. A few of you possibly sitting in here at the moment. Don't be too surprised if you do. You've got to focus. They're done all over the world. In every major city of the world, these English tests are done. And I must admit, I think they're a little bit ridiculous sometimes, because they make it a little bit hard, because it's clearly that 99% of you, if not 100% of you in here, speak English. But you do have to sit the test, not only, of course, to prove to them that you can speak English, but you will need the points to lift you above the pass mark. The current pass mark or lodgement mark for Australia at the moment is 60 points. So if you're above 60, you can lodge in expressions of interest. So let's just run through a typical Australian application. On a skilled migrant, you've got a qualification, a doctorate, a bachelor's, or a diploma, or a trade. There's your points, 20, 15, or 10 for your qualification. New Zealand has 1 assessing authority. Australia has over 30 of them. So if you're an engineer, you're assessed by Engineering Australia. If you're a nurse, the Nursing Council. If you're a teacher, the Australian Institute of Teaching and Successful Learning, and so on. So step 1 for Australia, and for New Zealand, by the way, is identifying what is commonly called your ANSCO code, which is Australia, New Zealand Standard Classification of your occupation. You've got an ANSCO code, okay? That ANSCO will relate to, in Australia clearly, will relate to an assessing authority. So if you're a teacher, let's just use a teacher as an example, you are assessed by the Australian Institute of Teaching and Successful Learning. They will charge you $810 for the skills assessment, 8,000 Rand. They will also require you to have sat the English test. And for a teacher, it's slightly unusual. You've got to get 8 for listening, 8 for speaking, 7 for reading, and 7 for writing. If you don't do that, you don't pass. You've got to sit it again. And by the way, for a teacher, you've got to do the academic test, not the general test. Most jobs that require registration will require you to do the academic test. So once you've sent your documents off to the Skills Assessing Authority and paid their fee and done your English test, that whole process normally takes somewhere between 2 to 4 months, that whole process. So in 4 months, provided you're sitting on 60 points, you are ready to lodge what we call an expression of interest. You're uploading your information into the Australian Skills Select website, and you're saying to the Aussies, I qualify, guys, pick me. Now, Skills Select is actually a computer-based process, and depending on what your occupation is, depends on what the pass marks are sometimes. For example, accountants at the moment, even though you can lodge on 60 points, you're not going to be selected on 60 points. They're currently selecting accountants on 75 points. A lot of IT professionals, for example, software engineers, etc., are assessed, and you can lodge on 60 again, but they're currently selecting on around 70, 75 points. So we need to know what your occupation is, what your ANSCO is, and we can tell you what the current selection mark is. When you load an EOI, you can stay in the expression of interest pool for 2 years. I've never had anybody stay in the pool for one client stay in the pool for longer than a year. So normally you are selected, clearly because we will tell you what the current selection mark is before you spend all this money, but once you're selected, you're normally selected within 1 to 3 months. Once you are selected, the Australian notifies you, congratulations, your skills select account has changed, and that's good news. That means you've actually been sent an invitation to apply. And that is when you send them all of the documentation. And that's clearly your qualifications assessment, your English language proof, your proof of work experience, your qualification documentation, etc. Everything that goes to getting your family accepted into Australia. And that's when they whack you, because they charge you $3,670 for the main applicant, $1,835 for the spouse, and $920 per child. So if you're a family of 4, that's a 70,000 Rand exercise. The beauty with the Australian system is you don't pay it until you're selected. So the only thing that could really go wrong by that stage is you've got a criminal record. Well, clearly, and it'd have to be pretty major, a major criminal record, or of course you've got a major health issue. So if you're worried about those things, please discuss them with me. Please discuss them with... Doing it again. Hello? Yeah, please discuss them with me privately. I don't normally use a microphone because I'm actually really quite loud. I'm only using it for the camera. So just discuss any potential issues you think you may have with criminal charges. Please don't tell me now, sticking up your hand and saying, yeah, etc. And or health issues as well. And don't forget, of course, to get to Australia 100 years ago, all you had to do was actually be a criminal. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. So I hope there's no Australians in the room, and if there is, please, I didn't really mean to offend you. Okay, so some of you are saying, okay, well, hold on. What occupational list, shivers, what occupational list am I on? Okay, Australia has their main list, which is called the medium and long-term strategic skill shortage list. There's about 180 occupations on that list. 4 or 5 years ago, there was nearly 500 on the list. It's shrinking. And then they have what we call state lists. Each state, or they now call it the State and Territory Skilled Occupations List, the STSOL. If you're not on the main list, if you're on the main list, the visa is called a subclass 189. Blue chip, top of the range visa. It takes about a year to get it, 12, 15 months to get it. Once you've got it, you can live where you want, you can do what you want. Okay? But you might not be on the main list, and you're thinking, well, hold on, how do I get in? You use a state or a family member to nominate you. On a state, you might be on the state of South Australia, for example, or on the state of New South Wales, or on the state of Queensland. Australia has 8 states and territories, and they've consolidated their lists. When you use a state to nominate you, you clearly have to be on that state's list. And you sign a declaration that says you're happy to live and work in that sponsoring state for 2 years. And you get 5 bonus points for that. So you might actually need those bonus points. You might even be on the 189 list and sitting, for example, on 55 points, and you need the extra 5 points for the state. So then, of course, you're going to have to go and live in that state for 2 years. There is a visa called a subclass 489 as well, which is also state-sponsored and family-sponsored. A family can sponsor you if they are your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your son, your daughter, your uncle, or your aunt. But they must live in a regional area. In other words, they cannot sponsor you if they live in Sydney, Newcastle or Wollongong, Melbourne, Brisbane or the Gold Coast. Everywhere else in Australia they can sponsor you into, but not if they live in those areas. Because if you go in on a regional sponsorship, a subclass 489, you get 10 bonus points, but you also must live in a regional area. Ironically enough, you don't necessarily have to live in the same regional area as your sponsor. You can live in any regional area, but you must live in a regional area. Okay, so if you looked at Australia, any tradesmen in the room going to Australia? Okay, guys, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are tradesmen, in the old days in South Africa, to become an electrician, for example, you did a 5-year apprenticeship at Olifantsfontein. Nowadays, you can get an electrician's qualification in South Africa in 6 months. So what Australia has done with all trades coming out of Africa at the moment is they're going to test you. And it's not cheap. So if you are doing a job which requires registration, like electrician or plumbing or refrigeration and air conditioning, it's a double-stage assessment. First stage is you're sending your documents off to Australia. They charge around 8,000 odd Rand for that. And then the second stage is a practical test, which is done in Cape Town. There's only one college that does it. It's done in Cape Town. So you go down to Cape Town for a weekend. They will give you a booking date well in advance, and those practical tests are around $1,600 to $1,700. So if you add the 8,000 Rand and then the 17,000 Rand, your skills assessments tradespeople are around about 24,000, whereas the average skills assessment is somewhere between $500 to $800, so it's a lot cheaper. But it is what it is, unfortunately. If you're in a job, let's say you're a fitter and turner or a boilermaker, then you don't do a practical test. You do an interview, and that interview is done in Sandton. and it's done over Skype. It's about a 2-hour interview, whereas the practical's about a 6-hour. I've never had anybody fail it, ever. So it's not difficult, it's just costly. You've just got to do it, unfortunately. You cannot lodge an application for a skilled migrant visa into Australia without a skills assessment. You can't. And of course your English if you need it as well. And clearly we wouldn't even, I suppose one of the major advantages of being licensed for New Zealand as well is, and I wouldn't call New Zealand a poor second cousin to Australia, we just, at all. But if you don't qualify for Australia, it is a really good second option going to New Zealand. And in fact, if you took, we're doing about 40 families a month at the moment, and 30 of them are going to New Zealand. Okay, so any questions on Australia at all before we move on to New Zealand, please? Sir. That's the state nomination? What's your occupation? Okay, so a degree, have you? Yeah, a diploma. Okay, you're not going to Australia. You won't qualify. Sorry. Your occupation requires you to have a degree in Australia. You'll get into New Zealand, but not Australia. Okay, well, once you've completed your BTEC, you're assessed by an institution called VetAssess as an environmental person, etc., etc. And VetAssess will require you to have a degree plus 1 year's post-qualification work experience. Otherwise, they won't give you a positive assessment. Okay? Sir? What's your occupation? What's your occupation? The question was, should he use his wife, who's a labour lawyer, or himself, who's an IT manager? If we use your wife, is she here? No. If we use your wife, she has to pass conversion exams as a lawyer. They're expensive and they take time. They're like up to 200,000 Rand to do, about $20,000 to do them. And they'll take about, anyway, if she really rushes it, 6 months, but usually around 2 years to complete. I'd use you hands down. What's her second degree? No. Thank you for mentioning that. Of the 33 assessing authorities, well, 30-odd assessing authorities, only 2 will assess you on your work experience. One is an institution called AIM, the Australian Institute of Management. So if you're a senior manager, and by senior I mean senior, you're reporting to the CEO or the CO, and you have 3 structured management levels under you, you've got 9 managers cross-reporting, and you're probably managing about 60 staff minimum, okay? You could get a positive assessment from AIM even without a degree, provided you've got that corporate structure under you. And the other one is the Australian Computer Society. Australian Computer Society will assess you on your work experience as opposed to your qualification. Because a lot of IT professionals don't necessarily have a BSc in computer science. They've got 25 years experience in IT. So they get assessed on their work experience. But be careful with that because ACS will take work experience away from you. So you can actually not claim all of the work experience you've done depending on what the qualifications you've got. If you email me both your CVs, I'll send you back the lawyer pathway for your wife and the IT pathway for yourself. Okay. So that was all state nomination. Has anybody else got questions on Australia at this stage? Yes, ma'am. No. Funnily enough, I had somebody yesterday told me that they'd spoken to another agent and they said a diesel Mac had to go to Cape Town for an assessment, which is absolute rubbish. It is not a job that requires registration, so it's a technical interview, and it's done in Santon. Okay. The only ones are refrigeration, air conditioning mechanics, electricians, and plumbers. Really, everybody else is generally a technical interview. Okay. Anything else for Australia, guys? Sir. How do you find work before you go? To which country? The advantage you've got with Australia is you've got your visa. You've got your visa in your back pocket, okay? Because those of you who are looking at New Zealand, which we're going to talk about in 2 minutes, okay, are struggling with finding work because you're coming up with you don't have a visa, you don't have a right to work, so I can't employ you, okay? Sorry, there's an awful fly flying around my head at the moment. Anyway, so that's something that, in New Zealand, we're very jacked on the job assistance, job search process. In Australia, we're not really, because we don't need to. when you've got your visa, finding work becomes 100% easier. It really does, because you can approach companies saying, I don't need you to sponsor me, I have a right to work in your country. So 10 to 20% of people would find work before they go by getting onto the internet, using search engines, contacting local recruiters, which is part of what Rose does clearly. Where, as I say, we're not jacked we're incredibly well jacked in New Zealand, but not so much in Australia. Don't forget, for Australia, when you land, you can do anything you want. So if you're a qualified electrician and you decide you want to become a gardener for the first month just to bring in some money, well, you would. That was a really bad analogy, but you would do that because electricians make more than doctors in Australia. But it's something that we would assist with. You would identify the region that you're going to, and then sit with Rose and say, right, this is my plan, this is what I'm looking for. Can you please find me some onshore recruiters that will be happy to work with me? So that would be, have a chat to Rose on that afterwards, okay? Automatic. So whatever you get, whatever visa you get, your spouse gets, clearly. So yes, automatic. No, not at all, unfortunately. The only thing, an advantage with a British passport is you can actually stay there on holiday for longer. So, for example, in New Zealand and Australia, you can stay for up to a year, but you can't work on the British passport. You clearly will get exempt from English on it, though, if you don't need the points. Okay? Any other questions on Aussie? Guys, I'll come to you soon. Visa. Yep. Well, then if your wife's a vet, I would use your wife as the main applicant. Yeah, yeah. Then you can do anything you want, absolutely. And then you don't even have to complete your BTEC. Okay? Yes, guys. Yep. They better. Listen, and I'm not going to name names, all right? But there is a company in this country, well, there's two companies in this country that are just awful to deal with. It's sign here, sign here, sign here. Give us your money, okay? And they don't even tell you what the processes are and the pathways are and etc. Transparency is, I mean, this costs a fortune, guys. I mean, you've got to be transparent. If you're not feeling comfortable with the agent, clearly I will talk to you privately if you want to, and I'll tell you who not to touch if you want to. But if you've already contacted an agent and you are unhappy with them, if they are registered, you'll give them the fright of their life by saying, listen, you're not doing your job properly. MARA is there, or IAA is there. I'll report you if you don't start doing your job properly. So we are governed by a code of conduct. And that code means everything is about you. Everything is about the client. We work for you. If you hire us, we work for you. So the transparency should be there. Hello? Yes. And of course, if you Google, and clearly I'm passionate about this, if you Google the best sporting team ever, all right, who comes up? The All Blacks. Okay, so when it comes to, well, again, all types of visas, but I'm going to skip forward. I'll come back to the points test in a minute. New Zealand is all about the job you get. In November 2016, New Zealand put their points up for skilled migrant category from 100 to 160, overnight. On August the 28th last year, New Zealand changed the way that they assess people completely. It is always based now on your ANSCO, your occupational code. New Zealand is a country that you don't necessarily need a qualification to get into, because you can be deemed skilled by your work experience, under any occupation actually. So, New Zealand's all about your ANSCO code and then the job you get. Since November 2016, I have had one family, hit the pass mark of 160 points without a job offer. One. And we're doing 30, 40 families a month to New Zealand, remember? So bottom line is, you're probably not going to hit the 160 pass mark without having an offer of employment. I had a lady contact me yesterday. This is an example about who you should and shouldn't use. She said, Andrew, I won't be using your company, thank you very much, because I've been told by another agent that I qualify for skilled migrant in New Zealand. I emailed her back immediately. Whether she uses this or not is irrelevant, but I emailed back immediately and I said, with all due respect, there is absolutely no way you qualify to get into New Zealand without the job offer. So whoever's telling you this, I would double check their licensing for a start, and secondly, ask them to prove it to you. How are you going to do that? So, if you're going to New Zealand, you need a job offer. How do you get a job offer from South Africa? It's virtually impossible. It happens, but it's virtually impossible. So if you are not prepared to hop on a plane and go to New Zealand to job hunt, don't start this process. Because you will get frustrated with it and you'll start ripping your hair out. Now, in saying that, all of a sudden in the last month, I must admit, we're getting people pick up the phone to us saying, listen, I've got a job in New Zealand now, what do I do now? Okay, it happens. It happens if you are proactive. Because And clearly it also depends on what you do. I mean, if you're a diesel motor mechanic, we can probably get you a job tomorrow, for example. But there are certain occupations where, I mean, if you're a bank manager, if you're an accountant, if you are maybe an attorney or something like that, generally ask yourself this: would you hire somebody you've never met? And a lot of companies will say, no, thank you very much. You've got to take the time, the effort, and the money to get over to New Zealand and go for interviews. I've been doing this 25 years, guys, and New Zealand is all about, in fact, it's always been about the job offer. So how long should you, okay, now what normally happens, let me just come back a bit. What normally happens is we identify, if you're a couple, clearly, you're in a relationship, we identify the person who we believe collectively will be the easiest to find work. Common sense. And then that person, we then start, so when you come on board with New Zealand, you actually get 3 starter packs. One for your documentation collection, one from Rose, which is a job assistance, job search starter pack. How you should prepare your CVs, how you should be approaching the market, how you should be preparing your profile. You should be doing things like LinkedIn. Getting a job is all about networking. You might have people in New Zealand that can help you find work, etc. Pull them all in, get them all in. Because who cares who gets you the job? Be it we assist you with it, be it you get it, be it somebody down the road, be it another agent get it. It doesn't matter. It's critical that you get the job offer. But when you get the job offer, it can't just be any job. If you are an ANSCO skill level 1, 2, or 3, which is usually a degreed person or a diplomaed person or a trades person, then you need to earn $20.29 an hour, which is $50,523 a year. Now, with all due respect, you should be earning that anyway. You shouldn't really be taking a job that's less than 50 grand a year anyway, to be quite honest. So as long as you're a fitter and you've got a job as a fitter in New Zealand and you're earning 50 grand a year, you will have a pathway to residency. And you can add your spouse and your children to your application. But let's say you were that same fitter and you were offered $48,000 a year, you'll get a 1-year visa only. After that year, you've got to leave for a year and you cannot put your spouse and children on that visa. So clearly, when you're in New Zealand or when you're negotiating with your employer, and we actually do this quite a lot for you and with you, is we will get involved at no charge to the employer at all to tell them what the benchmarks are, what they need to do to be able to assist you. The exact story happened with one of our clients the other day. He was offered $48,000, plus he got a company car as well. So, I mean, that was another 20 or 30 grand, but the car doesn't count. Okay, so we asked his employer. He sells cars. This gentleman, funnily enough, we asked his employer, who is a company in Alexandra, which is just outside of Christchurch, to put his pay up to 51 grand. He did it overnight. Okay, he can do it. It's pretty easy to negotiate with the employers, providing, of course, they want you. Okay, if your ANSCO, your occupational code, is a 4, 5, or a 6. Then you've got to earn $76,000 a year, which is $36 an hour. Now the problem with that is ANSCO skill level 4, 5, and 6s are usually your non-degreed people, non-qualified people, etc. Generally not deemed as skilled as somebody on an ANSCO skill level 1, 2, or 3. So just be careful there. It's all about what you do. Now you might say, okay, I've been a teacher, but I want to go to New Zealand now and I want to go into retail. I want to be a retail manager. If you do that, you can count your teaching qualification, but you can't count any of your teaching work experience. Okay, so you've got to be very careful on how you put your points together for New Zealand to get residency. Because the New Zealand pass mark, as you can see there, is 160 points. You get 50 points if you get a job in Auckland. You get 80 points if you get a job outside of Auckland. When your spouse gets a job, as long as it's under the right ANSCO code, you get another 20 points. So there's 80 to 100 points just in the job offer. So as long as you are under 56 years old and you are deemed skilled, either by way of a qualification or work experience, then you can lodge an application for residency. But think about this. Residency is not done here because you're not on 160 points. So when's it done? It's done when you're working in New Zealand. So step one. Advantage of a British passport, by the way, is you don't need a visa to get into New Zealand. Now, as you're all aware, since November last year, as South Africans, we need visas to go to New Zealand. It costs $165 to get a visitor's visa for New Zealand, and when you get it, you've got to show Immigration New Zealand that you have strong ties in South Africa. Because their argument to you is, if you go to New Zealand and you don't get work, what have you got to go back to? So if you've resigned your jobs, you've sold your homes, and you're taking the kids out of school, INZ will not issue you a visitor's visa, okay? Because your genuine intent should be to, they know you're going over to job hunt because we tell them you're going over to job hunt. But if you've done all of that, you've got no reason to go home again, okay? So when you what the young lady's answered here, she's British and Dutch passport, they can just go. But when you're on a plane and you're going across the ditch, as we call it, which is the Tasman Sea, and you're landing in Auckland, Wellington, or Christchurch, you're given an arrival card. That arrival card says the purpose of your visit. Don't tick holiday. Tick business or other. Because if you tick holiday, you're leaving yourself open for a character issue. Because if you then get a job and then you lodge an application with INZ, they're going to see, well, hold on, when you entered the country, you lied to us. Okay? And that one little thing could be a reason for your rejection. And if Border Control takes you aside, you've all seen the TV shows, but if Border Control takes you aside, just relax. Just be honest. Just be honest with them. They will never turn you away if you are honest with them. Clearly, if you're clients of ours, you're going to have letters from us anyway. And because you've already got your visas, 90% of you won't, the likelihood of you being pulled aside is exceptionally rare, and again, exceptionally rare. But if you are pulled aside and you're on a British passport, just tell them the truth. You're over there looking for work. Okay, simple as that. And just say one other thing. I know I'm not entitled to work without applying for the appropriate visa to allow me to do so. Simple as that. Okay? So, we get you a visitor's visa. It takes about 25 days to get you a visitor visa, 24, 25 days, and then off you go. How long do you go for? As long as it takes. Now, I know that's not a good answer, but our average is somewhere between 3 to 6 weeks to get work. Okay? Unless, of course, I mean, guys, tradesmen. Any tradesmen in here? You know, lots of you are. Tradesmen get jobs really quickly. They really do. New Zealand's going through one of the biggest construction booms in its history, if not the biggest. It's pumping the construction industry in New Zealand at the moment. So if you're in any form of construction, you should get a job relatively quickly. In other words, 10 days to 3 weeks. Also pumping in New Zealand at the moment. Yeah, absolutely. We do 10 to 20 families a month that are on planes and working in New Zealand. In the last 5 years, I think I've had 5 fail to get work. So the other thing about this is, you know, you might be 45, 46 years old and you had the same job for 25 years. So when was the last time you went to an interview? Shit. You've got to interview well. You've got to sell yourself. We had a family in New Zealand recently, and the family went because they were all on foreign passports. He took the kids and the family and whatever. He turned up at the interview with the children, and they were eating McDonald's burgers. Okay? So it's just, I mean, or you're going for a senior management position and you arrive in a t-shirt. You know, it's all about what you guys do and how you sell yourself and how confident you are. So, and we'll train you on that as part of our service. We'll do that for you. You might think that's a bit silly, but it's not. And again, a lot of it depends on your occupations. Rose, you know, if somebody's in the construction industry, she's going to clap her hands and go, yay, etc., etc. But if you're a bank manager, they're very difficult to place because the banking industry in New Zealand is very difficult to get into, unless you're a local person, etc. So we'll talk to you about that type of thing, either telephonically, email, Skype, or face-to-face. We'll prepare you for this. We also have an office in New Zealand. That office is run by 3 South Africans. Peter Lemmer, who runs the office, immigrated 2.5 years ago, Peter. And then Ashley, who's got 22 years recruitment experience, she immigrated about a year ago. And then we've just hired a New Zealand resident who's actually a South African. Her name's Lazan. It's their job to meet with you. In fact, before you go, they will Skype with you. Because they've gone through all of this. They'll tell you what to do, what not to do, how to do it, etc. And then sometimes they'll assist you with placements as well, because they'll have an order for an electrician or a nurse or a teacher. We're currently screaming for early childhood teachers in New Zealand. They're getting Skyped and getting hired without even travelling there. So, teachers, yeah, early childhood teachers at the moment. So, be aware that we will work with you no matter what job you do, but we will not flower it up. If we think it's going to be tough for you to find a job, we're going to tell you it's going to be tough for you to find a job. But that doesn't mean you don't go, it just means you're pre-warned, in other words. So, then New Zealand's all about the points. Again, you really can't see it from back there, so it's very hard to go through. But offers of employment clearly are there. You get bonus points for being... You get bonus points for being on the long-term skills shortage list, like you might be an environmental scientist, for example, or you might be an accountant. They are on the long-term skills shortage list, so you get bonus points for that. Again, when you send me your CVs, I'm going to take all of these points and email them back to you specifically for you. It'll be a pathway to residency for you. So clearly, if you're both qualified, please send me both your CVs, not just one, because and a lot of times, don't forget the job offer isn't points tested. So you hop on a plane, you go to New Zealand, you get a job. You got the job, what do? You don't even have to come home. The main applicant's application is electronic. So we can submit it whilst you're in New Zealand. You can go and have a holiday in Fiji if you want to, because the processing time for your work visa should be 24, 25 days. Offshore, ironically enough, it is. But onshore, it's a bit slower at the moment because they're just inundated at the moment. INZ are closing 12 of their offshore offices this year. They're closing Pretoria, they're closing London, and in fact, a work visa from South Africa, if you've already got a job, your work visa is going to be processed in either Shanghai or Beijing from now on. Okay? So we've got a wonderful rapport clearly with all the visa offices worldwide we've been dealing with for many years. But the point is, if you're onshore, it's done locally. So you might even say to yourself, well, hold on, if it's taking 6 weeks onshore for the visa to be granted and only 3 offshore, why don't I just go home and lodge it there? Clearly it's another flight back again, which you've got to take into consideration. But depending on how quickly the employer wants you to start. And that's what, again, we'll work with the employer on managing their expectations, okay? So you get points for 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10 years. Now let's use that as an example. Let's say that you are an accountant, but you're an accountant by profession. You're not an accountant by qualification, okay? You've been an accountant for the last 10 years. An accountant is an ANSCO skill level 1. So you've either got a degree or INZ will take 5 years work experience away from you. So out of those 10 years that you've been an accountant, they're going to bank 5, which means you can only count 5 years. Okay, so keep that in your mind when you're doing an assessment. Clearly, I will give it to you when you email me your CVs, and I will have it. So, and I'll explain it as well. It's very well explained in the emails. We make it very simple to understand. We're taking 3 years off you because, etc., etc. Okay? You get points for your qualifications, clearly. 40 for a diploma level or trade, 50 for a degree, and 70 for a master's or 70 for a doctorate. And then, of course, you get points for, we've done the employment, and you get points for studying in New Zealand, which most of you won't qualify, your ages, remember you've got to be under the age of 56, and you get points for your partner's qualifications as well. So, we can get most people that are deemed skilled by work experience, we can get you into New Zealand providing you are prepared to work hard with us together proactively to help find you work. The ladies brought up a very pertinent question, very relevant. She mentioned another consultant suggested she resigns, or they resign to go to New Zealand because, of course, you can't get 6 weeks off from your work, etc. And very rarely you might not even get 3 weeks because you took them at Christmas time, for example. Should you resign? It's a difficult one to answer because my argument would be don't resign until you get the visitor's visa. Because once you've got the visitor's visa, see, if you've still got work a job offer when you're applying for the visitor's visa, clearly you're showing Immigration New Zealand that you do have a genuine intent to go back to South Africa if you're not employed. So the advisor wasn't wrong in advising you that at all, but I would be suggesting that you didn't resign until you actually applied and got the visitor's visa. Which means that when you get your visitor's visa, it usually means you've got to travel within 3 months. So get your visitor's visa, then resign. Or resign as long as I'm sure you're married, you're in a relationship. Okay, so as long as maybe your husband hasn't resigned. It's because if you go to New Zealand to job hunt and your husband's still at home with the children, clearly it shows immigration that you've got hopefully a major reason to go back to South Africa. So yeah, I would do it, but I wouldn't resign without applying for the visitor's visa. Okay. Right. So, when you're in New Zealand, the other advantage with New Zealand is, for the work visa, you need the job offer, a passport, a medical, and a police clearance. That's it. So you don't need your skills assessed. You don't need to sit English. Not for the work visa. But for the residency visa, depending on the points you're claiming, you will need, both of you, it's compulsory to sit English for a start. Do it in New Zealand. You're going to save 6,000 Rand. Do it at $600 then, or $700. Do it when you're in New Zealand. You might not get your qualifications. If you're a tradesman, for example, 9 times out of 10, you're going to need your qualifications assessed by the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. That's 787 dollars, which is 7,000 Rand. Do it in New Zealand. We don't need it for the work visa. So that, just the English alone and the skills assessment, you can save 15,000 Rand. Do them when you get over there. 15,000 Rand is an airfare. So you can do it when you get over there. So what we try and do is manage your monies as well. You can do them here, of course you can. You can do them before you go, of course you can. But to save that sort of money before you go is helpful. Now, when you're in New Zealand and you're working, providing you are hitting the points, you will then be able to lodge a residency application, provided you've done the English tests and had your skills assessed if necessary. When you lodge your residency visa, INZ, you load the LI, you're selected immediately, 2 weeks, straight away, because you're above 160 points. You pass. And then you send them everything. You don't have to do the medicals again. You don't have to do the police clearances again. They're still valid. Okay, so the only thing you're really handing them in is proof of your work experience, because 2 years is 10 points, 4 years is 20, and so on, up to 50 points. But if you're claiming your work experience, you have to prove it. You can't just claim it on your CV. You've got letters from the company you work for, basic duties that you did from a person in that company that is entitled, of course, like an HR manager or CEO, that's entitled to write those letters. You might say, well, hold on, the company doesn't exist anymore. I worked for them back then 12 years ago, and I worked for them for 10 years, but they don't exist anymore. Then we could get away with affidavits, but not affidavits from you, affidavits from people that worked with you at the time. Okay, so we can get away with that. So you might have been born in Zimbabwe, for example, and you can't get your birth certificate. As long as we show Immigration New Zealand that you've attempted to get the birth certificate, then we can get away with that as well. So it's all about what we can and cannot do, and how we go about doing it. Please, New Zealand, often you're going to be split up, because somebody's going to hire the main applicant, and they're going to want you to start within 6 to 8 weeks. So what do you do with the house? We've still got to sell the house. We've got to take the children. My daughter's matricking this year, etc., etc. It doesn't matter, guys. You've got to do what you have to do. So if the main applicant has to go first and spouse and children follow 2-3 months later, it is what it is. So you've just unfortunately got to do that. And by the way, that happens a lot, where the main applicant identifies, let's go, get over there, get secured, and while the main applicant's in New Zealand, of course, doing the complete opposite to what you're doing. You're selling the home, you're grooming the kids for travel, etc., while main applicant's finding the home and finding the schools and etc. So holding your hand through the entire process is what we do, but we really want you to understand, I'll come to you, that this process is, I can do this by giving you an example. 90% of our clients are wonderful people to deal with and 10% aren't. It's just nature, okay? People are like that. And we have a client that's being hired by a company in Auckland at the moment, and the company's saying to us, why are you asking me for all of this stuff? I've hired 5 people in the last 5 years from overseas, and I haven't had to do that. Well, the rules 3-4 years ago weren't what they were now. So you need to understand, we have never failed on a work visa. So why? Because we're meticulous. When you give us the final documentation to check for your work visa or residency, we have a 7 to 10 day processing time because we don't make mistakes. We want to make sure that the money that you have spent, you get your visas. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, why would we be in the business, clearly? And one thing I am very proud about is my team cares. If you look on our website, Stephen, one of our file managers, says one of the major reasons he loves his job is because he loves helping people realize their dream. And that came from him. So this is what we do. So New Zealand process, people says, how long is it? Australia's going to take 12 to 15 months, fait accompli. New Zealand, how long is it? It's up to you. Because you're the one that decides when you want to start. Because if you say, I don't want to be in New Zealand until March next year, then clearly why would you start job hunting now? You'd start job hunting in September, October. Whereas if you want to be there in the next 6 months, start now. Because it takes a good couple of months to get everything done properly, get the head straight, and prepare for that job search trip if you're having to go. If you're proactive at night, sitting on the internet, looking at Seek or Kiwi Jobs or Indeed, Trade Me, whatever, you'd be quite surprised if you start getting some responses from the prospective recruiters and or companies, jump at it. Because the likelihood of you getting a job offshore used to be 0. It's now about 20%. But you can be Skyped, remember. Technology today is awesome, so you can be Skyped, that type of stuff. Yes, sir. No? Contracts is fine? Letter of appointment from your company? Some of you might be reluctant to tell your current boss that you're leaving the country. You got a letter of appointment, last couple of pay slips. That shows you're still at the company, okay? That type of stuff. So we've moved on to question and answers. That's just some pretty stuff. Relocation division is Rose's division. That is opening bank accounts for you, helping you meet and greet at airports, arranging accommodation, rental cars. Clearly, we've got an office in New Zealand to assist with that as well. So that's Rose's division. Schools for the children, that type of stuff, etc., etc. So that's all. You can speak to Rose on that or drop her an email on that. And the job search assistance. This is our biggest headache. We're finishing now, by the way, 2 more minutes. This is our biggest headache because you're saying, well, hold on, why did I pay you all that money? Where's my job? Okay? You are not paying us to find you a job. Okay? Please, let's get that clear. Straight up. All right? Will we assist you? Absolutely we will. Because this is what we do for a living. Will we assist you with how to write the CVs? We use a company, I'm not sure if she's on here at the moment. We use a lady, she's also South African, she's based in New Zealand. You won't hear it because the sound's not there, but I'll let it run behind me. She runs a company called Lemonade. Her name is Lauren Holthausen. Some of you are possibly even dealing with Lauren. She lives in Wellington. She's brilliant. Every CV that Lauren has done, they've never been failed to be placed. Not through our company anyway. So this is just all about what Lauren does. And sorry, there's no sound on it. Oh, this is car people. Okay, so don't worry about that. Okay, so job search assistance is just that. We will assist you. We'll help you with how your CV should be put out. So would Lauren, clearly. We will help you with how to approach the job market. Some instances, we will be able to assist you to get placements because we've got orders. We're signing SLA agreements with companies in New Zealand all the time, every week. So, but we want you to be, we want you to understand that the job search process is the biggest piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Because without the job, we can't do anything. So we need you to be proactive. We don't want you sitting at home in Bloemfontein saying, where's my job? I paid you all this money, where's my job? I'll be saying straight back to you, well, you haven't been to New Zealand yet, so hop on a plane and get over to New Zealand and then we'll help you. I'm not saying we won't help you from here, of course we will. But you need to be realistic about it, okay? The gentleman was saying there's one person in Australia and one in New Zealand, so to gauge it, I would perhaps join a Facebook group. There's some pretty good ones. There's some, South Africans in Australia, South Africans in New Zealand Facebook group. If you contact Rose or Candice, our head of marketing, and my PA, she'll be able to put you and give you the links to the Facebook group because. No. I've done 10,000 families in the last 25 years, and to my knowledge, I've had less than 10 come home. And that's a very good point, though. If you are going to do this, and you are not prepared to stay there at least 2 years, don't go. I had a client, I think it was about 2 months ago. They were in New Zealand 3 days. 3 days? They're going back, believe it or not, but they were in New Zealand 3 days. They booked some accommodation through Airbnb, and unfortunately they didn't like it. Well, big deal. Go find something else, etc. But by the way, if that happens, I'll give you, and they come back, I'll give you your money back. But you've got to, if you're not prepared to give it 2 years, don't go. You mean permanent accommodation? Especially in Auckland. Well, thankfully we don't have that, but yeah, listen, if you look at New Zealand as a whole, there's 4.7 million people, 1.7 million live in Auckland. So Auckland property prices are ludicrous. A standard average home in Auckland at the moment, $1 million, 10 million rand. So move out of Auckland. And that's why INZ are actually giving you bonus points to move out of Auckland. But in saying that, accommodation, before you hop on a plane, you should know where you're staying. And we can arrange that, Airbnbs, you can stay in the YMCA if you want to, you can stay in the Sheraton Hotel. You can stay in homestays with other families that put people up on short term, so like 2-3 months, etc. Okay, we need to have a chat. But the entrepreneurial work visa in New Zealand, you've got to hit a certain amount of points for. And you've got the business you're planning over there, it's got to be innovative. And it's very, very difficult visa to get. Whereas if you identified a business that you could already purchase, for example, and that business hired you, we need to have a chat. Well, then I need to sit with you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and just have a chat with you about it, and I can advise you on what visa to use. Okay. The lady asked what happens to debt, and we've all got debt. What happens to debt in South Africa? Ironically enough, you don't have to clear your debt. There is no, here, I'm not saying you don't have to pay it, but you don't have to clear it. There's no exchange control laws in New Zealand or Australia when it comes to that sort of transfer. So if you owe Edgar's $5,000, you can send money on a monthly basis back, or you can debit order it back, etc. But there is no financial requirement for skilled migrant visas into Australia or New Zealand, so they don't even look at your debt, so don't worry about it. That's a very good point as well. On an Australian visa, when you are granted a residency visa for Australia, you have a 5-year window. You've got 5 years to live there. But you must validate the visa within the first year of the visa being granted, and they'll backdate the validation and that 5 years to when you did your police clearances or your medicals. So Australia's good that way. You've got 5 years. New Zealand you don't, of course, because you're going in on a job offer, 9 times out of 10. But so 5 years for Australia. Many times as you want. On an Australian visa, it's called a returning residence visa. You can travel in and out, but in New Zealand, when you're granted residency, that initial residency is valid for the first 2 years. And then if you left the country and went to Fiji on holiday after that 2 years and you forgot to apply for permanent residency, your visa's gone. So to apply for permanent residency in New Zealand, you've got to be living there as a resident for 2 years. It's $300 and it takes 10 days. You literally just upload it into the INZ website, you fill in the relevant forms, pay them their $300, and then 10 days later you are a permanent resident of New Zealand for life, even if you're not living there. Again, an excellent question. Up to the question was children. What age are they deemed dependent? The answer is up to and including the age of 24 years old for both countries, providing they are dependent on you. In other words, they're studying or they're not working at all. Okay. Now, the thing with New Zealand on that one. New Zealand's just said now, which I must admit I don't particularly think I agree with, but anyway, if you have a child over 18 and let's say the child isn't going to university but is also not working, you can put that child on the application, but that child will only get a 9-month visa. So you better get your residency within 9 months, because clearly the child will then be on your residency applications. Residency in New Zealand takes about 6 to 9 months to process, and it's done whilst you're on shore. So worst case scenario, if let's say it takes 12 months, you might be sending your 20-year-old son, to Australia for a couple of months on holiday, or back to South Africa to visit family or something, if the residency hasn't been approved. Believe it or not, I'm actually going to the office now to consult till 5 o'clock. I want to thank you all for coming. I'm sorry about the lack of chairs. I think we were pretty much okay with most of you. Please remember the assessment is free. Send me the CVs, pick up the phone to me, whatever. If you want to come and see me, you can make an appointment, just drop me a mail. There's business cards at the back there. If you want to stay behind and ask a few questions, I've got about probably 20 minutes or so to answer some personal questions. Thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.